Why do atomic masses have decimals? E.g., carbon has a value of 12.01, but I've never seen 0.01 of a I've never seen a proton and neutron, to be fair, but I've never seen 0.01 of a proton and a neutron. I've never heard about that.
Isn't it like the average of all isotopes of carbon or something like that?
It's the average number of So you're right, it's the average number of protons and neutrons in a sample of carbon. So if I was to randomly grab a bit of carbon, okay, most of it would have how many protons? Or all of it would have how many protons? Most of it would have how many neutrons? 6. Some would have 7 neutrons, which would make it carbon 13 with a mass of 13. Happy with that? Yeah. There's also a special type of carbon which is even more rare called carbon 14. Who's heard of carbon dating? You know how when we find fossils and we're trying to find out how old they are? We use the isotope carbon 14, which is extremely rare, to tell us how old the sample is. We're going to talk about that much later in the term.
Isn't it like not accurate?
There can be inaccuracies in it depending on the sampling. So, and it's half-life dependent. We'll talk again. We'll go into that later on in the term. What is an isotope? Thank you, Bronson. What do you think an isotope is? The baseball team that Homer Simpson supports in Springfield. Blake, what do you think? Pardon? Good. So I'm just going to write when the number of neutrons is different to the expected amount. So, how do I identify what's the expected amount?
What do you mean by expected amount?
Well, how many neutrons do I expect to see in a carbon sample? 6. How do you know that? That's what periodic table says. How do you know it was 12, not 13?
Is it like an average, like most amount of time?
Yeah, you're right. So the one that pops up the most amount of times. How do I know which one will pop up the most amount of times? What I want you to do is I want you to look at carbon. I want you to look at an element like sodium, for example. So sodium is 22.99. That's sodium's atomic number. So the question is, how do you know how many neutrons to expect in an atom? How do you deal with the mass? What do you do? So sodium is 22.99, carbon is 12.01. What's the expected amount of, what's the atomic number expected in sodium? Who thinks it's 22? Who thinks it's 23? 24? So no one has any opinion. The atomic number for sodium is, the mass for sodium is 22.99. Who thinks most sodium atoms have an atomic mass of 22? Who thinks most sodium atoms have an atomic mass of 23? Who thinks most have an atomic mass of 24? How do you know it was 23? The answer is 23. How do you know?
It's the closest to 23.
So what do you do?
You round it up.
What about 12.01? What do you do? So how do we know how many neutrons to expect in the atom?
Round everything.
Round the atomic mass number. Very good. I'm just going to write atomic mass actually. I don't want to write number because that'll confuse you. So round the atomic mass.